Good morning, class. Welcome to Unit 2.7b, Solving Literal Equations. This will be part 2. Okay, remember when we are solving literal equations, what we are doing is looking for the variable. So in this case here, we are looking for solving for r. And then we're going to use the properties of equality to isolate that variable. So this is using your inverse operations. If you see adding, we're going to subtract. If you see subtract, you're going to add. If you see in multiplying, we're dividing. If you see dividing, we're going to multiply. All of these things we did when we were solving for variables, and they're going to equal a number. Now we just have a bunch of variables like you see below, and make sure that we are going to use those inverse operations to solve, and of course combine like terms if possible at the end. So when you work through today's problems, be careful because a lot of these original formulas look a lot like what we were doing yesterday. But now we're going to solve for r. So if we're going to solve for r, IRT, that's all multiplication. So that's going to tell us we need to divide both sides by IT. The i's cancel, the t's cancel, and that leaves us with r equaling p over IT. And in this case, there's nothing really to simplify. We solved for r, and we accomplished our mission. So let's take a look at another one. Okay, p equals 2l plus w. But today we're going to solve for l. So think about what we did. When we have this, distributing property here, before we get into the l and w, we do need to take a second to distribute and get our terms separated. And once we get to this point, now we can start using our inverses. So if you see this plus 2w, we're going to subtract 2w from both sides. That's going to leave us with p minus 2w. That's going to equal 2l. And we're going to divide by 2. Now remember, when we're dividing by 2, sometimes that would be, an acceptable answer. But we are also going to want to look at making sure we divide, well, what's p divided by 2? Well, that is p over 2. And what is negative 2w divided by 2? Well, that's just a negative w. So take a second to simplify if we can. And that is going to be our equation solved for L. Okay, these are probably our most important ones, the ones we're going to do the most often. Solving for y. This is going to help us get back into that y equals mx plus b form. So when you're solving for y, a lot of times it's look to see if we can add or subtract anything. So first thing we can look at doing here is subtract 8. That's going to leave us with x minus 8 equals negative 3y. And then we're still trying to isolate y, so negative 3, that's, the same thing as multiplying. So we want to make sure we divide. And again, take a second to make sure, let's break this up. What is x divided by negative 3? Well, that's just the same thing as saying negative x over 3. What is negative 8 divided by negative 3? Now, if it gives you some weird decimal, which this one we can see will, just make sure negative divided by negative is a positive number, and just leave it as that improper fraction. Now we have it in that y equals mx plus b form, and we could easily find those slopes and y-intercepts when the time comes. So let's take a look at one more. Okay, again, we are going to solve for y. So we have the y here. Let's go ahead and say, all right, we got this negative 4x. Well, what is the inverse of a minus 4x? Because this is adding to our problem. So if we add 4x to both sides, remember, keep in mind, negative 4 plus 4, that's going to be a 0, leaving us with 2y on the left side of the equation. That's what we want. I always try to keep that x first in writing these. Again, just trying to keep it in that y equals mx plus b form. And the last thing we want to do is divide by 2. In this problem, when we look at 4 divided by 2, this one will simplify. This is a step that we want to make sure we're taking. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then when we look at what is 9 divided by 2, well, that's going to be a decimal, so we'll just leave it plus 9/2. And we're back to that y equals mx plus b form, solving for y. All right, that's our last example, so let's take a look at some practice. Please take a few minutes to solve through each of these problems. Make sure you're solving for whatever we see highlighted here as the question mark. Take your time solving, simplifying, and checking your work. Good luck.